I should just say, for those who aren't familiar with your bio, you spent 20 years working for the Defense Department, 10 active, 10 as a contractor. I think that's right. Working a lot of the time on missiles and missile defense. So would say you're literally an expert on that subject. And our munitions stock is like a big factor in how this goes going forward. So where does this war go, do you think?
It's hard for me to imagine. We were talking about this beforehand about how I'm always just hopelessly naive and optimistic when it comes to all these things. I was the guy, full admission, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, who was being like, no, I don't think they'll do it. That would be crazy.
I said that on TV, unfortunately.
Same thing as we were building up all of our munitions for this attack on Iran. I was the one saying, it just doesn't make any sense. Just from a technical standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, this doesn't make any sense because we're not going to invade Iran. Iran knows we're not going to invade Iran. I'm doing it again, by the way, right there. But this was my thinking. And so there are, like, knowing those things, there are just certain limitations to what we can do in a standoff war, meaning a war where we're mostly launching munitions from outside of Iran's borders for fear of their own air defense network and flying our own manned aircraft over them. And also, our strategy has changed over the last, over the course of the war on terror, where we have this very strong dependence on unmanned drones, the Reapers now, the Predators famously in the Iraq and Afghanistan war, where, we've come to rely on them to a tremendous degree. But those are not stealth platforms. You can't get real close with them. What you can do is launch long-range standoff weapons from far away. But there's only so much you can do with these things. People have this idea, I think, like if a missile hits this building that we're in, that's going to be really bad news for us. The people across the street, they'll probably be fine. This is not, these things are not nuclear weapons. Like a Tomahawk missile. You remember back when, in the first Trump administration, when he launched those Tomahawks at that Syrian airfield because they supposedly used chemical weapons.
Yeah.
Launched something like
that 80, was a lie, I think we know.
Yeah. He launched something like 80 Tomahawk missiles at this airfield, and it was back up and running a week and a half later. I mean, these things are not massive payload because they got to fly 600 miles or something to get to the target, right? So a huge portion of it is just the rocket fuel to get it there. And so the payloads are 500 pounds, maybe, a little more or less than that, which is, again, if you're in the building, that's bad news, but you're not going to level a civilization, as Donald Trump keeps threatening, using standoff weapons like that. And so knowing that and having a rough idea, it's been a while since I've been in the game, but having a rough idea of what our stockpiles are, of what's involved with, fighting a long distance war like that, where our bases that are in theater are under assault and mostly not usable. It makes the logistical element extremely difficult. I was describing to you how if you have say a destroyer, which is our primary air and ballistic missile defense platform, and also the platform from which we launch our Tomahawk missiles, and we have them in submarines as well, but mostly destroyers and cruisers, and more destroyers than cruisers now. Maybe, you've got 128 missile cells. Some of those are going to be intermediate range anti-aircraft, anti-cruise missile, SM-2 type missiles. Some of those are going to be Tomahawks, and depending on what the mission is, will depend on the total loadout, but some of those are going to be Tomahawks. Some of those are going to be vertically launched torpedoes. Some of those are going to be really short-range ESSMs. And then some of them are going to be long-range ballistic missile defense missiles, right? So let's say you've got 32 long-range anti-ballistic missile defense missiles. When a missile's coming in, you don't fire one missile at it. You fire two in each volley, and usually you're sending multiple volleys before the first volley even reaches its target because you want to be pretty sure. And you don't want, things are traveling so fast that, you don't want to necessarily find out that you missed the first time and then have to make the decision to fire again. So multiple missiles each time. If you got 32 missiles, you'll be really lucky. I mean, this is if everything goes absolutely perfectly, if you can shoot down 8 incoming with that. Well, what happens then? You don't have a supply ship that rolls up and gives you another magazine of missiles to pop in. You got to go back to one of the very few bases around the world where we've got large stockpiles of those missiles and the facilities on base to reload them. And it's hard hats and cranes, and it takes multiple days just to do that, let alone the
time. Just to reload? Takes a couple of days?
Just to reload. And that's not counting the time it takes to transit, going, all the way to Diego Garcia and back. And
Can you, for those who don't have a map handy, is Diego Garcia right around the corner?
no, it's way out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It takes, depending on the platform or the ship that's going out to it, take you close to a week to get out there.
One way.
One way. Yeah. And then a couple days to reload as well. And so, one of our ships is out there. Maybe it gets shots off at 8 missiles, and then it's got to take 2.5 weeks to go reload its missiles and come back. It's just something that was not sustainable. And it's one of the reasons that I just thought, this is crazy. I don't think they're going to do this because it just makes no sense. And as we saw, it made even less sense than I thought, because one of the things that, those of us who are on the technical side of missile defense understood for a long time, that the general public, and honestly, a lot of government and even military officials, I think, like high-level military officials, didn't understand. Because I think that whereas certain aspects of the data might have gotten to them, the narrative that got to them was very often rose-colored, in terms of what our actual capabilities were. And, look, if we want to do a missile defense test, a ballistic missile defense test, we will wait until all of the conditions environmentally are perfect. We will do it at a specific time where they'll say countdown, 10, 9, 8, so exactly when they're launching, exactly where they're launching from, exactly where that missile is headed, and we place our assets, our radar and our missile launchers in specifically the place that will give them the absolute best view and best chance of engaging that target.
What? This is during a test?
This is during like a test, right? Because we're trying to baseline the system. We want our data to be something that we know under absolutely controlled conditions, or to the extent that we can make them that way, what our data is going to read. And then we can judge deviations from there. And there, we'll often, we'll usually hit the thing, but not always. It's still tough. It's hard to do. Ballistic missiles are very difficult. And this is something, by the way, that, even through government shutdowns and everything like that, it was basically SOCOM and ballistic missile defense. We just had unlimited money. We were the two. We never shut down. We never had any of our budgets looked at, anything like that. Because we placed a very high priority on it. And so from a technical standpoint, we knew it was very difficult to shoot down a ballistic missile. And about a week or so into the war with Iran, I'm watching all these videos, just crazy, like the footage we get out of these wars now. And you'll see a ballistic missile coming in, and you'll see a volley of 2, volley of 4, or 2 volleys of 2 go up and engage the missile. Very often the missile would land and blow up somewhere where it was headed. But then after about 2 weeks, about 10 days, 2 weeks, and then from there on, I started seeing all these videos of a ballistic missile coming in, and it was just, we would flood the sky with interceptors, 8, 10 interceptors for every incoming. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, first, this kind of makes more sense. Like at first, I was knowing the effectiveness of ballistic missile defense systems, and we have the best in the world, by the way, but it's just a technically difficult thing to achieve. Knowing the limitations of it, I was surprised at first that I was seeing volleys of 2 and 4 going up. Once they started to get up to volleys of 8, 10, 12 missiles per, I said, well, this makes more sense. And they would come out and say, we're having a success rate of 97%. We're shooting down 97% of incoming. It's like, well, yeah, but you're shooting 10 interceptors at every one of them. And so, you're shooting it down, but at what cost? And when that started to happen, then I realized that this thing is way more irrational than I even thought at the beginning. And there's no way that this can be a protracted war, because we just don't have that many, and we don't have a defense industrial base that allows us to sort of ramp that up real quick. This is something, these systems nowadays are so proprietary and so specialized and high tech. You can't, it's not like World War II where you can tell General Motors and Ford to start making tank parts.
Exactly.
This is something that even if you had the budget put aside, even if you had all of the resources you needed to build 5 more factories, we don't have the personnel to man those factories. We would have to get people that we have now to train up an entirely new workforce to build these things. It's just something that would take years under the best of circumstances. And so, honestly, I was surprised that it lasted as long as it did, especially since I know from people that I speak to on a regular basis, good friends of mine who work in the Pentagon, that at the highest levels on the uniform military side, at least, they were perfectly aware of the problems that even from the earliest days that we were going to have issues with ammunition stockpiles. We were going to have issues defending all of the things that we had committed ourselves to defending.
Yes.
And you saw very quickly that we essentially abandoned a lot of places that probably, a lot of Arab countries who have spent a lot of money, a lot of credibility with their own people, a lot of, they've spent a lot building up their relationship with the United States for this eventuality. And they found out what that was worth very quickly when we started moving a lot of our resources over to, honestly, much less strategically critical areas of defense around Israel. And so, I mean, the whole thing has been, it's been a disaster, not just for our relationships in the region. It's been a disaster just in a much broader strategic sense, because, if you look at Afghanistan, you look at Iraq, people say we lost those wars. And granted, what we found out in those wars was not that the U.S. military is incapable of achieving military objectives. We found out it's not the best tool to fight an embedded counterinsurgency.
Yes.
Fine. But I promise you that the Russians, the Chinese, all of our potential adversaries out there, potential peers, they still looked at the United States and they were like, yeah, but I don't know. In a real war, like, we just don't know what they can do. Now everybody knows. Everybody knows the sheen is off. They know what not just our political limitations are, but what our technical and actual capabilities are. And that's going to reverberate as countries start to adapt their own geostrategic posture to what they now see are genuine limitations.
How long can this go on?
I mean, it kind of depends, right? Like there seems to have been a shift recently where Iran realized, this is how it looks just from me as an observer, that Iran kind of realized that they were getting played a little bit by allowing things to die down in a tit for tat while we kind of catch our breath and let oil prices go back down and let bond yields fall a bit. And then we start again and they launch some in return. But then when we stop, they stop, kind of letting us set the pace and set the terms. I had to laugh. I mean, it's obviously none of this is funny, but a week or so ago when Iran launched those missiles at Jordan and they were like, it was a sneak attack, this dastardly sneak attack. I'm like, is there a ceasefire that I'm not aware of right now? We're in a war. And so it seems like they've adjusted a little bit to not letting us set the terms and set the pace to the extent that we had been before. And so if we had been allowed to just continue to do that, a tit for tat on our own terms at our own pace, I mean, we could probably, from a pure military standpoint, not talking about global oil reserves and stuff, we probably could have continued it for quite some time. If the Iranians, as it seems now, are wise to that, and they say, no, you're not going to get a break and rebuild your interceptor stockpile while you do it, you're going to continue to spend those things. And then, I mean, things are going to come to a head very quickly.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.